Credit's got to be given. There's a super chat here from Man who says, this was one of my most favorite performances of this season. Professional and controlled. Doing it in the run-in shows the team has progressed. Still have more to prove before we are there, though. Like, Jason, you've been someone who's come on here before and ranted and raved about the lack of maturity, the lack of structure. How impressed have you been in these last few games watching your team navigate this title race the way they have?
Yeah, so Terry, I recently done a TikTok video in terms of Arteta and how he kind of changed Arsenal. Yeah, so of course Arteta should have been sacked several times and reasonably so, but this season is something different. Like, we tend to control games. The defense is a unit. We're fighting together as a team. Like, we galvanize as a team as itself. So I wouldn't say this team. People say, oh, Tottenham's 11 is better than our 11, XYZ, due to like individual brilliance. But I feel like as a team, we are a unit. Like, like as a betting man, you would say you wouldn't really like count on Havertz to score. You wouldn't bet on anyone to score. Like, it's basically unlikely. Like, you wouldn't know who's going to score. But it's one of those things where, like,
do you mean that from the angle? I want to try and help you a bit there. Do you mean from the point that there's so many different people that could score, it's hard to predict which
I know
one?
what you mean.
I knew what you meant, but you said it in a way that made it sound like Kai Havertz is fluking these goals, and I wanted to save you from the comments.
No, it's all good. It's all good. But yeah, it's basically I just wanted to say that we actually improved as a team, like in terms of we learned from our previous mistakes from last season itself. So from last season, we kind of this season we kind of learned that we need to be a bit more controlled and reserved, and use that energy like Man City did for the previous seasons and the season before that. We basically kind of learned from missing out on top four as well, and it's one of those things that the squad is basically slowly growing and showing what they're about. And this game kind of showed a little bit of maturity, and how they can actually turn on when they really need to be turned on as well. And the only downside I would say, would be the left-hand side today, actually. Zinchenko. He's a defensive liability itself. I felt like, he could have, Arteta could have actually put Tomiyasu there. But overall, I just wanted to say, Arteta, I wanted to give you a massive credit, actually. So, I give credit where it's due. I slag you off when it's due as well. But big up to you, Arteta, man. I can't lie.
It's an interesting take there, Dio, that Jason had around he should have been sacked on 2 or 3 occasions. I understand that from the perspective of he could have been, but you look back in hindsight now, are you looking at this as an Arsenal fan and thinking, thank God we didn't sack Arteta, thank God we signed Kai Havertz? There were a lot of gooners that didn't like the Declan Rice links at a certain time. There's been a lot of things done at Arsenal in the past 3 to 4 years that have generated huge criticism, some of it from me. I'm not sitting here acting like it wasn't me as well. And I know you've got to win the trophy for it to be completely right.
To answer that question, actually.
Yeah, go on.
In terms of that, so I haven't really finished my answer. Like, I mean, of course, I wouldn't really sack him, just yet. Like, of course, he just needs to win a trophy. He needs to win a Premier League or a Champions League this season. Or what? I wouldn't say it was bust, but what?
No, I hear what you're saying. I'm just throwing it out there. There's been so many things that Arsenal have done that have been criticised, and you look at that pitch today. Odegaard was a player that was getting a lot of crap when he first came, delivered. A lot of people didn't want Rice originally, delivering. Gabriel was a bozo, delivering. Ben White, 50 million, too much money, delivering. Why are we bringing in Raya? Delivering. Kai Havertz, what a joke, delivering. Do you get Arteta himself, clown, delivering? It's so interesting how the majority of those criticisms are starting to look really silly now.
Yeah. I just want to remind people that when Wenger came to Arsenal was in talks with Sir Alex Ferguson. 6 months before that, if you don't know that history, go check it. And Sir Alex said he was not going to work with Graham as his assistant. They actually approached him and he said no. So when we finally got Wenger in, like, who's this guy from France and blah, and he's not going to do well. He's not going to look at what he went on to do. I will say this about Arteta. When we signed Arteta, I was always Arteta in. You will never find me anywhere saying Arteta out. And I'll tell you why I was always Arteta in. I realized the rust of the club from the club that I knew back in the day in Highbury to the club that we had become after Wenger had left. And I knew that it had to take a whole upheaving, which means you're digging into the ground, taking out all the roots, taking everything apart and rebuilding the entire thing. We had the stadium paid off. That's great. Now it's time to build the culture in the club, build the following of the club, build the mentality of the club. And that was important. I think a lot of us were so used to that, our invincible time where we had a great team. And because we won quite a bit in those 2 years, it's like, oh, we need a massive coach to just come in and we're just going to win. No. What Arteta has done, every single phase of it, every single phase, I'm talking about getting rid of players who were on Champions League wages, but not qualifying us for the Champions League. Getting rid of people who, staff members who were collecting wages way above what they should be collecting because we were qualifying for Europa and still not moving forward, not making enough money. Getting rid of all of that first, taking care of that back room, getting the right players in, coaching them. I stopped doubting Arteta when Granit Xhaka, who I had written off. I totally had written that guy off. I stopped doubting Arteta when Arteta turned Granit Xhaka into a beast in his last season with us. That's when I knew that this guy knows exactly what he's doing. And then did some digging into his history to find out that even when he was at the Barcelona Academy as a young player, he knew who Pep was back then. Realistically, for most people that don't know, I'm sure you've all heard this story. Pep called him when he was a player and said, when you retire, I want you to come and be my assistant because I want to come to England. Pep called him. He didn't call Pep. That's to tell you the level at which he had his little respect in that little circle. So I've never been Arteta out. I'm glad that we never fired him, because if we did, we'd be back to square one again. I know we want to win.
Yeah.
But this is how to win.
That's why I say hindsight is very lucrative. I totally agree. There were times when I understood people saying he had to go. I understand. I just look at it now, and I know what I'll get criticized for from this. People will say, "Well, you want Ten Hag on. What if he does the same thing?" The fundamental difference is we haven't changed our board. We haven't changed the backroom operations. He's had 18 months.
Can I ask you a question real quick? Do you
Go on.
think Pochettino's situation is similar to Arteta's situation?
Potentially.
First year?
Potentially. And when I say potentially, let's see what happens if some with the people running their club. So it could be. No, it could be. If Chelsea go out in the summer and buy, if they've got the money to, 3 or 4 really experienced, really good players and add it to this team, you could see them improve by a good 15 to 20 points next season. If, though, the same things persist again, then I believe what you'll need is a complete clear out of management and backroom staff. I'm still not convinced by Poch. I still think when they become a really good team, he'll still fail at the final hurdle because of the history that he has. But there's a chance. The difference is with Man United, as to my point, is that Ten Hag has spent nearly 2 years under the regime that we say is toxic. What I believe we need to do is clear out everything that's toxic, barring some of the players, because you can't get rid of a whole squad in one summer, and start again afresh. And I look at how Arsenal have done it, and it makes sense now. You should learn from these things. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't sack a manager 2 years in if you're doing really badly. You have to assess each situation independently of itself. But that's the element that I wasn't aware of 2 years ago when I was saying to Arsenal fans, I think you should sack the manager. I didn't know how much you were clearing out. I'm not an Arsenal fan. I've learned that over that time. Hindsight has made me change my mind about these circumstances. We're going to go to some super chats in a minute. Dennis is here with us. Another important and solid win today. Give me your thoughts on the performance in the game.
Genuinely, I think that was the most impressive win I've seen us have this season. Like, especially in the recent few games, we've had a lot of good wins. The way we were able to just get that victory and in such convincing fashion. I mean, I've watched the games obviously from Liverpool, Man City in recent weeks, but I genuinely feel like this Arsenal team is on a different level right now, and it's so good for us to see because we've hit the right form at the right time. I feel like last year we hit form in November, October time, and then started to fall off towards the end of the season. Whereas this year we've started to hit form around February, March, April, and now we're really starting to kick into gear. And every game I'm seeing a different side from Arsenal. Like Man City, 0-0. Good result in my eyes. We came, let's be honest, Mourinho, Simeone type performance, but we got the job done. Against Luton, played really well in the first half, basically shut up shop in the second half, got the result. And in this game, first half, good performance. Think we should have been more than 1-0 up, to be honest. We spurned a good few chances, but then we came out in the second half, didn't just think we could basically shut up shop at 1-0, went for the second goal, went for the third goal, and the last 10 minutes was basically just a kick around. Really solid performance, especially because psychologically, this would be a game that I think a lot of rival fans would see Arsenal dropping points in. Like Brighton away is not an easy game. Liverpool drew here earlier. Man City drew there last season. So for us to go here, not just win, but win in convincing fashion. Not like it was down to the wire or anything. Really solid performance. I'm liking what I'm seeing. Games are coming every 3-4 days as well. And many will say that's bad. You don't want to play so often. But for me, if you're in flow state, if you're winning games, it's good. You just knock it one after the other, knock them down. It's just so repetitive, but it's a good thing. It's like you play a game, training, play a game, training, and you just go one after the other, professional type job. And I think it's going to suit us. Going to suit us a lot. So I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Arsenal right now. Hopefully, long may it continue. We're fighting on all fronts as well, which I think is important. Last year, we got knocked out the Europa League. And although many thought that would be a good thing because we're only playing the Premier League, it actually turned out to be a bad thing because we got a bad result, obviously, against Liverpool's good result, but a bad result against West Ham, then followed up to drop points to Southampton, etc., Brighton. So it didn't really help us. Whereas this season, we're in both Champions League and Premier League. And if you look what happened earlier in the season, we lost to West Ham and Fulham. Then we played Liverpool in the FA Cup. We lost it, fine. But that gave us some kind of bounce back. And then we were able to pick up our form in the Premier League again. So I think we can use both competitions to its advantage, play well in both competitions. And for the first time in my lifetime, as a 21-year-old turning 22-year-old, I've got an Arsenal team that I genuinely think can actually compete. And not just compete, but win the highest trophies available as a football club. So yeah, delighted with what I'm seeing.
I'm gassed to see the smile on your face, bro. We're
smiling,
all smiling, bro.
I think you spoke a lot of facts there. We've asked everybody about him, but I wanted to get your take on Kai Havertz tonight because a maligned player, a player that I think I'm being generous when I say about 20% of Arsenal fans didn't want him to sign, but he's just getting better and better and stronger and stronger. I'd love to get your take on that, Den.
Bro, to be honest, I think it's more than 20%. I didn't want him to sign, especially for the price tag. And I'm going to be open and honest about that. But it's got to the stage now, and it's the biggest compliment I can give him. I think in our strongest 11, he starts now. I genuinely think that. I think in our strongest 11, he plays up front, and we have Saka right wing, Martinelli left wing. And I think throughout the season, I've always thought Arsenal's strongest 11 will be Jesus, Saka, Martinelli. But for the first time, I genuinely believe if we're going in a one-off game, whatever it is, Bayern Munich, for example, on Tuesday, or a Champions League final, I want Havertz in that team up front. I think that's the biggest compliment you can give him because in the biggest moments, he's standing up and he's being counted. He's not a lightweight. He'll throw his body around. He'll be an asset defensively on corners as well. That's so important because look at Man City. A big part to their play last season was actually their physical strength. Not just the fact they would pass you out the park. They could win games from set pieces. And we're adding that ourselves now with our units in there like Gabriel, Saliba. I think Havertz adds to that. I thought it was a brilliant performance from him today. I know on commentary, I believe Alan Smith gave man the match. For me, I would have given it to Gabriel personally, especially for his block at the last second, which I think just epitomized how much of a man mountain he's been. But I don't think that one Arsenal fan can slander Kai Havertz, especially in recent weeks. He's really, really turned up at the biggest moments for us and been a big part to actually contributing to Arsenal actually hitting form at the right part of the season.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that I'm a bit like you. I'm not an Arsenal fan, of course, but I criticize the sign. People go, all you ever say is nice things about Arsenal. No, I ripped into that signing. I thought that it was a waste of money. And we had this debate on the squad, and everyone go check the squad out after this show, scan the QR code. But about the eye test can sometimes be misleading. Now, when you think eye test, I'm not talking about Ronaldinho's and Zidane's and Messi's. There are some players that can do very little, but everything they do looks nice because they're just aesthetically pleasing. Where Kai Havertz, he does look clumsy. He does look a little bit like my puppy's nearly 6 months old. Like Kai Havertz reminds me of Rocky whenever he starts to sprint. He got long, gangly legs for a German Shepherd, and he's a bit all over the place. But because he's not aesthetically pleasing, every mistake he makes goes down to technique. But when you actually break it down, he creates chances, he holds the ball up well, and as his confidence returns, he's a good to very good football player. And I think, and it's a discourse we're probably going to have more on Monday on the Top 6 show about this idea that the way we judge football players, I think, has gone skew with, because as a football player, Kai Havertz is delivering. As a freestyler,
he's got everything in my opinion.
As a baller in a cage, as a freestyler, as a technician, no, he doesn't have that. But you don't need that to be a successful football player. You can't have a whole team of players like him, and you don't. But you can afford to have a few individuals like him, especially if he started what he's done for you in the last few months, and you've got to maintain this. But it's what he was doing at Leverkusen, scoring, creating, being effective. And for me, the aesthetic, eye-pleasing element can go out the window if you have someone delivering in that way, in that shape, and in that form. I want to go to super chats, guys. There's a lot to go through, and I'm going to pose some of these questions to you all. First one.